My name's Mark, and I always thought I had the perfect marriage. Lisa, my wife of 7 years, was everything I could ever want. Beautiful, smart, funny, and always so loving. We had a house, 2 kids, a comfortable life. I never once questioned our relationship, at least not until recently. For months now, something felt off. Lisa had become distant, secretive even. It was subtle at first. Small things like her staying out a little later after work or her suddenly becoming overly protective of her phone. I'd walk into the room, and she'd quickly hide it face down, like she was hiding something. Then there were the clothes. Lisa always dressed well, but lately, she'd been putting in a lot more effort. New outfits, expensive perfume, and a constant, almost obsessive, attention to her appearance. It was hard not to notice, but I pushed it aside, convincing myself that maybe it was just her way of treating herself. But then it happened. One night, I was making dinner while Lisa was in the shower, and I happened to glance over at her phone. I wasn't snooping, but a message popped up on her screen. It was from someone named Jake, someone I didn't recognize. The message read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again, babe." My heart sank. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but the evidence was right there. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. The weight of the betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks, but I didn't react. I didn't confront her, not yet. I knew this could be my chance to do something smarter. I took a screenshot of the message and sent it to myself. It was hard, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing I'd found out. Instead, I started to dig deeper. I began keeping an eye on her actions, tracking every little change. Soon enough, it became clear. She was having an affair with Jake, a coworker of hers. I could have confronted her right then and there, but something told me to wait. I was angry, yes, but I was more determined. I needed to make sure I had everything lined up before I made my move. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about something deeper. Something that would make her understand the pain of betrayal like I did. I had a plan, and it would make her regret every single moment of her infidelity. The days after I discovered the truth about Lisa were the hardest I'd ever faced. The anger, the pain, the humiliation, it was all there. But instead of confronting her like most people would, I decided to take a different route. I'd make her feel the way I did, make her sweat, make her believe that I was doing to her exactly what she had done to me. It was a dangerous game, but I knew it was the right one. I started slowly, making subtle changes in my behavior. It wasn't anything overt at first, just small things. I began dressing a little nicer for work, wearing clothes that I knew she would notice. On the days when she came home late, I would make sure I wasn't at home waiting for her. Instead, I'd leave, telling her I was going out with a friend. I didn't mention who or where, just left it vague enough to keep her on edge. But that was just the beginning. I set up fake text messages on my phone, messages that appeared to be from a woman I had never met. The texts were flirtatious, suggestive, and left just enough to the imagination to make Lisa uncomfortable. I'd reply to them in a way that was playful, but not too obvious. It was all about creating doubt, about making her feel the exact paranoia that had been eating away at me for days. Then came the lipstick stains. I knew Lisa would see them eventually. One night, after a business meeting, I made sure to wear a shirt that I knew she'd recognize. Afterward, I went to a bar and kissed a woman on the cheek, just enough to leave a faint trace of lipstick. I made sure I was home later than usual, leaving it there for Lisa to find. The next morning, I acted like nothing was wrong, but the tension between us was undeniable. I kept this up for weeks. I'd spray a different perfume on myself before coming home, one I knew she would notice. I'd leave my phone unlocked on purpose, knowing she'd snoop through it. Each time, I'd catch her glancing at it, her eyes narrowing when she saw the messages from my other woman. I didn't make it obvious, but the message was clear. I was doing to her exactly what she had done to me. And just like I predicted, Lisa started to crack. It wasn't immediate, but little by little, I could see her confidence begin to falter. The woman who once prided herself on her strength and independence now looked vulnerable. She'd ask where I was, and when I'd casually say, "Just out with a friend," her expression would tighten. She'd try to act casual, but I could tell she was getting insecure. One night, it finally happened. I, accidentally, left my phone unlocked while I went to take a shower. I knew she would take the bait. And sure enough, when I came back, she was staring at my phone, her face pale. Her hands were trembling as she put the phone back down, trying to act like she hadn't seen anything. But I knew exactly what she had seen. She was slipping. The guilt was starting to eat at her, and it felt so satisfying to watch. But it wasn't enough. I had to push her further. It didn't take long for Lisa's behavior to become even more erratic. The woman who had once been so independent and confident now seemed to be falling apart at the seams. It wasn't obvious at first, but I could see the cracks forming. She'd become overly affectionate, trying to make up for something she didn't even understand yet. It was as if she was desperately trying to convince herself, and me, that everything was fine. She started cooking my favorite meals again, the ones I used to love when we first started dating. She'd light candles at dinner, and the atmosphere was always calm, almost too perfect. I knew exactly what she was trying to do. She was trying to be the perfect wife, the one I could never suspect of doing anything wrong. But it wasn't working. Every time she tried to get closer, I felt further away. Her attempts only made the guilt inside her grow. It got worse when she started asking more questions. Where had I been? Who was I with? Why was I always texting this mysterious woman? The jealousy was becoming palpable, and I could see it consuming her. One evening, I casually mentioned that I was meeting a female friend for coffee. It wasn't anything romantic, just a casual get-together, but Lisa's face turned white. She didn't say anything at first, but I could tell she was furious. The next day, she followed me. I could feel it. She was watching me. I didn't care, though. I had a plan, and this was just a part of it. As I met my friend for coffee, I glanced around, half expecting to see Lisa lurking nearby. Sure enough, I saw her through the window, watching me from a distance. She didn't confront me right away. No, she was too caught up in her own thoughts. But the damage was done. That evening, she came home a wreck. I could tell something had shifted in her mind. A switch had flipped, and now she was scrambling for control. That night, she started drinking. She never drank much, but tonight was different. The wine bottle was empty before I knew it, and she was a mess, tears streaking down her face as she stumbled through the living room. She didn't even seem to care that I was there anymore. Her walls had crumbled, and she was about to expose herself in a way I hadn't anticipated. It started with an apology. "Mark, I messed up," she sobbed, her voice barely audible through the tears. "I was feeling neglected, and I made a mistake with Jake." But it didn't mean anything, I swear. I stayed silent. I didn't say a word. Instead, I just watched her fall apart, every tear making her guilt heavier. "I love you," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, please forgive me." I could see the desperation in her eyes. She was broken, pleading for me to take her back, to forget what had happened. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Her confession was all part of my plan, and I had to stay calm. She needed to feel the weight of what she'd done. She needed to face her consequences. But I wasn't going to forgive her. Not now, not ever. I nodded slowly, my face a mask of calm. "I understand," I said softly. But I wasn't fooled. This wasn't the apology I needed to hear. It was the one she thought would make everything go away. What she didn't know was that I had a recording of everything, every word she had just confessed. I had set this trap so carefully that it was impossible for her to escape it now. The morning after Lisa's confession, I woke up feeling eerily calm. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks had lifted. Not because I had forgiven her, but because I knew that the next step in my plan was about to unfold. Lisa tried to act like everything was fine. She kept apologizing, promising to cut Jake out of her life completely. She asked me if I'd think about it, and if we could just start fresh. But I knew better. She didn't want a fresh start. She wanted to escape the consequences of her actions. I let her talk. I let her think that maybe, just maybe, she could talk her way out of this. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the same desperation that had plagued me for weeks. And that's when I made my move. I calmly stood up and walked over to the dresser where I'd kept my phone. I picked it up and, without saying a word, I hit play on the recording I had made of her confession. The room was silent except for the sound of her own voice coming through the speakers, confessing everything, her affair with Jake, her guilt, and her desperate plea for forgiveness. Lisa's face turned ashen as she listened to herself. The color drained from her cheeks, and her hands trembled as she reached for the phone, trying to stop the recording. But it was too late. She knew exactly what I had in my hands now. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide with panic. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. There was nothing left to say. You were recording me?" she whispered, her voice shaking. The realization hit her like a freight train, and I could see the horror spread across her face. She had no idea that I had been setting this all up from the start. The guilt and fear were now her constant companions. I stared at her, my expression cold and unfeeling. "Oh, and by the way, I never cheated. I just wanted to see if you'd break first." Her breath hitched as she processed my words. The shame was unbearable, and I could almost feel the weight of her regret pressing down on her. But there was no turning back now. She had crossed a line, and she would pay for it. The next day, I filed for divorce. I didn't hesitate. The recording was my proof, my solid, irrefutable evidence that she had betrayed me. In our state, adultery could significantly affect the divorce settlement, and I wasn't about to let her get away with anything. Lisa begged me to reconsider. She tried to apologize again, but it was all for nothing. The damage had been done. She had already lost everything. At the divorce proceedings, Lisa was left with nothing. No alimony, no assets, and no children. She had thrown it all away for a man who wasn't even worth it. I walked away with my dignity intact. I had been hurt, betrayed, humiliated, but I had also taken control. I had gotten the justice I deserved, and in the end, Lisa's own guilt destroyed her more than I ever could have. I don't know what's next for me, but I know it's better than what I had with Lisa. I'm finally free of the lies and betrayal. The years of doubt and pain are behind me, and I can start over, without her. I'm moving forward, one step at a time, with my head held high. I've learned a valuable lesson. Trust is fragile, and once it's broken, there's no going back. But I'm stronger now, and I'll never make the same mistake again.